is Laura, and I am the Nerdy Needle. This is my first Flosstube video, so like all of you, I'm feeling really awkward talking to myself to a camera, but we'll see how I go. So I saw a get to know your Stitcher tag that someone else did as their first video, so I thought that that would be a good way for me to start in my introduction. So my stitching history. I started embroidering when I was in elementary school. My grandmother taught me some basic embroidery stitches, and I did some projects with her, and then I kind of abandoned it until I got to high school, and I did a couple of projects in high school. I completely taught myself, just bought a kit at the local yarn store and read the instructions and tried to do what it told me to do. So I did a couple of projects in high school. And then I went to college and life got in the way, and I didn't really stitch until about 6 years ago. I came back to it. I was in a major accident in 2012, and so I was in a wheelchair for a while, and it was a really awful experience. And one of the things that helped me with just managing the depression and the disability and everything else that had landed in my life was doing some stitching, and it really helped. It helped alleviate a lot of that, a lot of the emotional trauma that comes with being in a major accident. So I kind of picked up where I left off in high school, using the same rusty techniques I had learned there, and then I discovered Flosstube, and like so many of you, have learned a tremendous amount from my fellow stitchers. And I've come up with my own techniques, and so I thought I would join the club and do Flosstube. So what's my favorite fabric? I like doing full coverage pieces, and so I like 18 count Aida. I've discovered easy count pre-gridded fabrics, so if I'm doing a full coverage piece, I'm going to always use the easy count. I also have started stitching on linen, and I really love linen. I'm still getting to know it. I really love legacy linen. Right now I'm stitching on like 30 count, 36 count is the biggest or the smallest, I guess, that I've used so far. What I'm discovering is that there are pretty major variations in the feel of linen, and so trying to find your favorite brand, or I don't even know what to call it. It's a little bit more complicated than just going and buying some Aida fabric. Do I stitch on a hoop or a frame? I have a Millennium frame for my full coverage pieces, but I've actually been playing around with stitching in hand. I'm working on a sampler and a white work. And so I'm stitching those in hand, and that's actually, I'm really enjoying it. It's a very different experience than stitching on a frame with a full coverage piece. It's much more tactile because I'm touching the fabric. It's also quieter, which is really interesting. There's that, when you have your fabric, your Aida pulled taut on a frame, it's got that sound to it, that thwop, zzz, thwop, zzz, you know, as you're pulling as the needle pops through and then you pull the thread. I don't think my thread impersonation did very well there, but you get the idea. With linen, it's completely quiet. You don't get that pop and the thread dragging through the fabric. So that's something that I've appreciated. So yeah, I stitch on a Millennium frame. What is my favorite time to stitch? Pretty much any time, usually in the evenings if I'm working, but with lockdown, it's pretty much whenever. I've been finding that I get my second wind at about 11 o'clock at night, so there have been some late nights where I've gotten really excited about something, and then, you know, it's 3 in the morning and it's like, oh, I should probably go to bed now. Are you a floss licker? Yes, I am a floss licker. I try not to do it in front of people, but it's a great way of getting a nice point before you thread your floss. Do I kit as needed, or do I hoard? I'm trying to stay away from hoarding. I don't have a massive stash. I probably have more linen than I really should, and I kind of have put the kibosh on buying more linen. I am starting to branch out into trying different kinds of floss. So, you know, that's not really building up a stash. It's more just playing around with new materials. So, but I'm trying to avoid having a big stash. Do I have more FFOs or UFOs? Probably more FFOs. I have a few projects that are actually left over from like my freshman year in college that I'm actually still planning on finishing. They're really cute these little calendar pillow things, and I'm about halfway through the year, and so eventually that'll get finished because I kind of like that project. But it's going to be a very long a long process to get from when I started back in like 1990. So, but it'll get done. Do I stitch alone or with friends? Unfortunately, I stitch alone. I don't have any stitching friends. I have some knitting friends, but it's usually a solitary pursuit for me. Do I start in the middle or the corner? I am a corner starter, upper left corner. I double check and make sure that that I know what the count of my linen is, so I will do like a test stitch on it of 10 stitches and then measure it just to be sure, and then measure out to the upper left corner, and that's where I start. Do I use any kind of timekeeper or progress tracker? I am using the planner that Teresa Little Stitcher has come up with. She sells it on her website. I will put the link in the description below. It's actually a really good resource, and I really like it. Like everything, there's like little things that I would like to add or change on it, but overall it's a really nice a nice planner, a digital planner that she's put together, and I really appreciate her hard work, and I encourage you to check it out. What's my favorite floss? Cosmo, actually. My new person that I always make a point of watching, her Flosstubes come out every Friday, and I watch it on Fridays because she does such a good job. Jean Farish. She has a company, Jean Farish Needleworks. She's been designing needlework projects for like decades, and she is also a retired teacher. So as a fellow teacher, I'm a high school science teacher. I really appreciate good teaching, and she is an excellent teacher, and the resources that she provides with her kits are amazing. And so she got me to try Cosmo floss. That's her floss of choice, and I agree with her. It's more expensive than DMC. It's a Japanese floss, but it stitches beautifully. The coverage is wonderful. It just feels really nice in the hand. It seems like it's less fuzzy than DMC. The color palette is phenomenal. So given a choice, I will choose Cosmo. If I'm not doing a variegated floss, I will go with Cosmo every time. And am I a serial starter, or am I monogamous? And actually the better description would be, are you monogamous, polygamous, or what's the word I'm looking for? I can't remember it now. Or promiscuous, that's what I was looking for. So are you monogamous, polygamous, or promiscuous in your stitching? I am a polygamous, so I have several WIPs going at the same time. I rotate through them, not in any kind of set schedule. It's kind of like what I feel like picking up today is what I end up stitching on. So let me show you my current WIPs. I have quite a few. That's actually a finish. So my full coverage smaller WIP for right now is a Vervaco kit. I'm using the floss they provided. And I have those here. I picked this because this pattern, actually let me show it first. Excuse my threads. That's how far along I am. I'm using all of the threads that came with the kit, but I switched the fabric out for easy count, pre-gridded fabric. And you can see that I stitch on the diagonal, and I use a parking method with needles. And if that's something that you're interested in hearing about, how you can stitch without, on the parking method, without having to constantly be threading needles, I am in the process of putting together a tutorial for how I do it, because I haven't really seen anybody doing it the way that I do. So the reason I picked this, that's going to be the full picture, is because it reminds me of a vacation I took a long time ago with my cousin sorry about the glare. We went to Yugoslavia back when it was still Yugoslavia. We are both, well, he's my cousin, so we're Hungarian, and our family is from there. Both our parents or all our parents are refugees. And so we went and we moved to Hungary right after high school and lived there for a couple of years. And right before we came home, we took a trip down to Yugoslavia, to what's now Croatia, to the coast there. And they have these wonderful little quaint villages with these wonderful, just narrow streets with flowers. And the thing that really struck me about this was the sky. There's just that that really bright sky that you get in more southern Europe, or you would kind of like what you would see in like Hawaii. It's that really brilliant blue, that blue sky. And so this this chart reminds me of my trip to Porec and Pula a long time ago, before the Balkan War, before all of that mess that went on there. So that's my full coverage piece. I actually did a big chunk on it yesterday, really cruising through it. And one of the things that I really like about it is stitching on the diagonal. It's a really neat way to see your picture appear in front of your eyes, as opposed to just stitching straight rows or columns. You get more colors. There are just a lot more variations, and it holds my attention a lot more. So even on a small project like this, that, the reason that people stitch on the diagonal is to avoid having page lines on their large full coverage pieces. But even on a small project like this, that's not really a risk. I still like stitching on the diagonal just because it looks so cool when I see it appear. And it's just really fun because the colors just change a lot more quickly than if you're just going straight by rows. So that's my full coverage piece. This is kind of a primitive. This is from Snowflower Diaries. She is a Hungarian designer, and I actually haven't worked on this in probably a couple of weeks. I really need to give this poor just floating head a body. I'm stitching it with Gentle Arts sampler threads, so this is my first more serious look at variegated floss. Not that Gentle Arts is super variegated, but it is a slightly different technique. So I really enjoyed it. It's such a different experience than stitching on a full coverage piece. The techniques and just the mindset is just different enough that it's interesting, and it's a nice change of pace. So I'm really enjoying working on that, though I need to pick it up again. I've got everything just piled together here. And actually, this is my it's going to be rather large. And this is going to be big. This is from Chlorami. It's a Belgian designer, and I'm stitching it with Cosmo. I don't know what the color is actually. Yes, I do. 245. So it's Cosmo 245. And let's see if I can. And this is, oops. That's the full chart. And of course I'm getting all sorts of pop-ups. And so the reason I picked this is because there are just all of these goofy little figures. There's a rabbit with and every pop-up known to man coming up on my stupid iPad. Sorry about that. So there's like a rabbit with an umbrella, and there's these goofy looking birds, and there's a griffin, and so it's just a fun little, there's a hot air balloon over here. So it's just a fun way of just stitching kind of random things as you come across them. So I really like this one. And there's a, like right here, right there is a badminton shuttlecock and a racket, a badminton racket. And then I love this bird, a goofy looking bird right there. So it's a really fun design. So that's from Chlorami. And then the thing that I'm really excited about is, this is from Jean Farish, and it's called Lady Virginia's Garden. And it's this rather formal looking thing, and it does white work, which I've never done before. And I really, really like it. So if you don't know what white work is, where is my actual project? There it is. It is basically doing a kind of stitch that draws the threads of your linen. This is 30 count linen, so it's rather loosely woven, and it just kind of pulls the linen threads in specific ways and giving you kind of a lacy look to it. It's quite subtle, but it's really pretty. It's also called pulled thread work because there's the other kind, which is the withdrawn, which is like hardanger, where you actually cut your threads of your ground cloth and pull them out. So it's drawn work, withdrawn work. That's why it's called that. This is just pulled thread. And if this looks intriguing to you, I will put the link for her pattern. She does videos so each one of the sides of this piece has a different white work stitch on it, and she does a video for every single one, and the charting for this is extraordinary. I mean, I'm a science teacher, so I'm all about describing the world using figures, using models, and so I appreciate well-drawn figures, and Jean's figures for this are phenomenal. You can learn how to do this just by looking at her diagrams and watching her videos, and it will come out. I mean, it's really surprising that something that looks kind of complicated, the first go out, it's not going to be like completely perfect, but it's going to look really, really good. I mean, this is the first time I've ever done this, and look at that. I mean, it's really amazing, and it doesn't even take that long. Like this whole little corner, once you kind of figure out the pattern to it, it took me like maybe an hour and a half. So it's really quick once you get it. I mean, there is a learning curve to it, but once you get it, it's really not that difficult, and it's just stunning. So I am super enjoying it. One of the fun things is it uses linen thread. So this is kind of a rougher thread. It's not as bendy as cotton. You can see that it's almost like it's kinky a little bit. And it's that rough texture that gives you a little bit of additional friction. Otherwise you can also use pearl cotton, but it gives you enough additional friction so that when you pull that thread to make the pattern on the fabric, it will just hold really nicely. So I've really enjoyed working on that, and that's probably the pattern that I'm the most excited about right now. And it's a different stitch every time, so I'm just loving it. It's so exciting when you're like, oh, that's how you do it. And then an hour later, you have this really stunning stitch. So really enjoying that. I said that I'm not much for doing haul or for buying stash, but my local needlework store is Acorns and Threads in Portland. And so I've been branching out and wanting to try different fibers. So I bought some, where's the other one? So I'll use a lighter color. So I bought some wool floss, which I've never stitched with. And this is just some, this is some legacy linen, 30 count linen. I loved this garnet colored linen. This is 36 count, but it's just so pretty. I had to get it. Same thing, this is 32 count Belfast, and it was such a pretty color. I couldn't leave it. And squash blossom, though I did have her cut it in half, so it wouldn't be quite so much. And then I bought some silk, which I have never stitched with. So the wool that I got is from Bella Lusso, Fleur de Paris. And then I got some Gloriana, and silken colors. And then these are dinky dyes. So I've bought the PDFs for some modern folk embroidery smalls. So that's where I'm gonna try these out. Something that's small and not too complicated, and we'll see how I do with silk. I also bought some stitcher's lotion because I understand that stitching with silk, it's important that your hands don't have a bunch of hangnails and stuff for catching the thread. So those are my WIPs. So I don't think that qualifies me as promiscuous, but it does make me polygamous. I just love that. Being a little bit silly. So I have some finishes. This was a free chart from Jean Farish. This is stitched with Cosmo variegated floss. I don't know what the colors are offhand. And it was my first like seriously variegated stitching. And she has a video that goes with this that explains like the path to take, and this will be a scissor fob. She calls it a humbug. And then since I have enough fabric down in the bottom, I actually bought a charting software from my computer, and I figured these are hearts. So I basically just did this same thing and charted it out for spades, clubs, and diamonds. I'm not a big card player, but it seemed kind of a logical thing to do to try out making my own charts. So I haven't stitched it yet, but we'll see how that goes. But I did enjoy kind of delving into designing my own patterns for the first time. So that needs to get finished. And then this was the reason that, oh, then I have this. I can't remember. This is on 36 count. And this is, I have it written down. That is from, I got that on Etsy from the store as Cross Stitch Garden. It's some guy named Peter. I really like his patterns because he does some really interesting things with color. Like it looks like you're mixing the colors, right? You know, where they're intersections. So with the dark green and like that darker purple right there and on the throat. So it's a kind of a unique way of combining colors that I really like. And he has several other patterns that use some really interesting color combinations that I really like. So those are my hummingbirds that still need to go to the framers. Then I was at my mom's house and kind of looking through stuff, and of course it's the house I grew up in, so there's, you know, random bits of my stuff left over. And I was just walking through a room, and I look and I'm like, wait, that's my sewing box that my grandmother gave me. And I look in there and look what I found. These were projects that I started stitching with her and then finished in high school. This one I actually still had to finish the note there and the little bit on the leg. And there's this one too. And there's actually another completely unfinished embroidery pattern. So I actually remember going downtown to downtown Lake Oswego, taking the bus with her to the fabric store and picking these out and buying the floss, and her teaching me how to do a stem stitch and a satin stitch and so on. So I was so excited. I'd completely forgotten about those projects and that I found them. So that is a very long finish because I started working on those in probably I was around 10. So it's been about 40 years for a finish, but better late than never. And I'm really excited, and I'm certainly going to frame these and put them up to remember my grandmother, who started me on my stitching journey a long time ago. And then my final big finish is my pride and joy. This is called Meadow. It's an anchor kit. And I did the math, it's 48,400 stitches, I believe. It turned out just beautifully. I couldn't be happier. It took me a couple of years to finish it, but I learned a ton of new techniques. So I stitched this. I used Silky Sliver. This was the first time that I used Silky Sliver to grid it. That is a fantastic way to make your life a whole lot easier when you're doing full coverage. So if you don't want to buy easy count fabric, then use Silky Sliver for making a grid, and it takes a few hours and it saves you an immense amount of aggravation down the road. So stitching is a lot quicker and way fewer mistakes. I also stitched on the diagonal. I used a laying tool. I used my threaded needle parking method. And it really worked out well. So I'm really pleased. And so that's one thing that I'm kind of got in the works is doing a tutorial video on how I do the parking method with leaving my needles threaded, which works really well, and then you don't have to thread a million needles. So that is my favorite finish because it is so pretty. So I need to take that to the framers. And what else? I've got a new start that is, I guess I'm turning into a Jean Farish disciple because I'm going to do my first stitch along. This is a Jane Hattersley stitch along. So this starts on April 9th, and I'm excited to do that, and I'm all kitted up. Here's my floss. It's all Cosmo floss. So I'm ready to go with my first stitch along. So that is where I currently am. Those are my WIPs and my finishes and a little bit about me. One of the things that I'm thinking about doing is doing some tutorials. Since I'm a science teacher, I'm really good at explaining methods to people, like how to do an experiment. That's my profession that I've been doing for 18 years. So I want to use my teaching skills to explain some stitching techniques. I'm in the process of putting together a small website, so I'm looking to expand out and share what I know and help other stitchers and keep everybody else entertained, just like all of you have been entertaining me. So that is my introduction to myself. Again, my name is Laura. I'm the Nerdy Needle, and this is my first Flosstube video. If you enjoyed what I have to say, then please like and subscribe and do the usual stuff. And if you're interested in just learning some ways that people do full coverage, that's the thing that I feel like I would say that I'm an expert at it at this point. After 48,400 stitches, I think I've got it down. So if you would like to see how I do things, there will be some stitching videos, some tutorials coming along in the next few weeks about how I do that. So I hope you enjoyed spending a half an hour with me, and I hope to see you again. Have a good day.